Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. You've got a panel here that are all 0-1 when it comes to our football teams. And Joe, you're a Lions fan, right?
Yes, very unfortunate.
Yeah.
At least you still admit to it.
Not as unfortunate as Russ with the Jets.
Is it though? I don't know. That seems incorrect. I think Russ is better off than me.
Unfortunately, I think I am better off, and what is that really saying? But
yeah.
Well, we both knew that the Steelers were going to beat the Bills. We both said it.
Well, you said it. I thought it, but I didn't want to admit it. But then, it's like, it's one of those things. If I don't say it, it's not real. But but Joe, you know this. The local media was building up this game. They're building up the season. Oh, the Bills are going to go 13-4. They're going to run away with the AFC East. The question is not whether they're going to win the division. It's whether they're going to get home field against Kansas City this time around. And I'm like, guys, don't overlook the Steelers. They were they were a flawed team, but they did go 11-0. They improved their defense. They improved their offensive line. Mm-hmm. And I looked at that game yesterday, and the Bills were up 10-0, and I'm like, they should have been up 20. And bad play calling and rustiness on the part of Allen, and they gave that game away. I mean, Pittsburgh got some opportunities, and they took advantage of them. But the Bills have nobody to blame but themselves. So, I mean, that was my thought on it. But Russ, everything was overdone by what happened on Sunday Night Baseball.
Yeah, well, aside from the just A-Rod trying to prove to every Met fan that he knows the Mets and he was such a Met fan growing up, it's just like he's so disingenuous with some of it. It's like, yeah, I get it, A-Rod. You liked a couple players.
Yeah, no wonder J-Lo dumped you. But anyway.
Yeah, anyhow, without making it personal. So the whistling situation. So here's the way I look at it. It was with Taijuan Walker and James McCann. McCann is the one at fault here. He's the one. It's his job to tell the pitcher, hey, you're tipping your pitches. Let's switch it up here. If he didn't do that until the Yankees hit 3 homers because they figured out something, then that's on him. I didn't care for what Lindor did, but I laughed at it. I did, because it's like, it's Yankees Mets. Like, it doesn't take much to fire that situation up anyhow. And I'll give MLB credit for one thing. This is the first Subway Series that has mattered in like a decade, because either the Yankees have been great and the Mets stink, or it's at a time of the season where you really don't care.
Right.
But these games were amped up more. The murmur in the crowd was similar to the murmur when I was at the first Subway Series game at Yankee Stadium and Dave Malicki got the win.
Well,
it was similar to that.
And Joe, that was just
Joe Flint.
Dave Malicki, man.
Wow. But Joe, that was just by happenstance, because Major League Baseball wanted the Yankees and the Mets to play for the anniversary of September 11th. So normally the second series is in late June or early July, and by this time, the Mets are 12 games out of first place in the NL East, and the Yankees are wherever the Yankees are. But I'm going to get your viewpoint on the whole thing, because I have mine.
I thought I was pretty plain with it when I saw it last night. When Marley Rivera said that the Mets were upset about the whistling thing, I was like, and some folks were comparing it to the Astros stuff.
Oh my God!
Let's not even go there. This is like it. And Russ is right. It's on James McCann. Like, if he realizes that he's tipping his pitches, you got to go out there and be like, all right, man, we got to change. We got to do something different here.
Yes.
And if Walker is getting frustrated, he's like, I don't understand why this is going on. Somebody in the Mets dugout has to know. Somebody on the field has to be like, hey, man, we're sitting on the bench and we know what you're throwing.
How about the bench coach? That's what a bench coach does.
Somebody else has to notice that. But to get mad at the Yankees for taking advantage of it, like, dude, it's on you. Like, you gotta do your own job about this and take care of business. And if the Mets are motivated by what they feel is righteous indignation, cool. Like, it worked for you. Congrats. But these are two very average teams. Like, they're two very mediocre teams. And, hey, Mets, hey, great win for them. It's cool for them. That's nice, but they're still 8 games worse than the Yankees, and the Yankees are barely hanging around the playoff race.
Yeah, and it's funny. I would think that if Francisco Lindor needed to be motivated, he would have 34 million reasons, because he has been I think pretty average this year after a really slow start. He played better in the second half, but honestly, and I'm going to be consistent here. I destroyed Jose Bautista with the bat flip. I'm destroying Lindor with his whistling thing, and
you have to destroy Stanton too. Then
no, I was going to get to that.
Okay.
And him and Baez waving Stanton to come on. I'd like to see you take on Giancarlo Stanton in an alley somewhere, Francisco, because he beat the crap out of you. But this is the thing. This is where baseball's going. I mean, the lot of people don't like the NFL or don't like what players do with dropping the ball in the first down and all the celebrations in the end zone. And baseball is getting to that now.
It's too late for all of it. Honestly.
I know. It's like, honestly, if you go back 10 years, Joe, and Lindor hit that second home run and did what he did, either the next batter or the next time Lindor got up, he'd get a 95-mile-an-hour fastball in the flap of the helmet. He'd get it up and in. And there was nothing, and Chad Green grew the fastball right down the middle and allowed him to hit a third home run. This sucks. This is not the baseball that I like, that I grew up with. Maybe it's gone forever. I don't like it. I don't think it's real baseball anymore.
Well, the part about it not being real baseball to me is that it's a 3 true outcome league. Again, it's strikeout, walk, or a home run.
Right.
And I love home runs. Don't get me wrong, but when I'm seeing, and I watch a ton of the Yankees, but I see, Joey Gallo hitting under 200, but he's got 30 home runs. Like, okay, like Rob Deere did that back in the day. He got ripped on.
And 40 hits.
You stole the name I was going to drop there, Joe. Yeah. Rob Deere, who hit like 190 with 100 walks and 35 home runs. It's like, okay, there is more than just home run, strikeout, or walk.
One last note here.
But, I mean, that's the way baseball is now, though. Like that. I mean, it's not the batter's fault. It's like,
no.
And listen, I love advanced stats, and I love being able to break down the game as much as anybody. But the way it's been used in baseball, it's like Frankenstein's monster, as far as I'm concerned, because it's taking those things that used to be advantages. Now everybody's doing it, and now everybody's building their teams around those styles that specifically go for what those numbers are their strengths. And so it's so teams can't get a one-up on each other. Which, hey, I get it. That's that's competition. That's how you have to do it. But man, oh man, like the last 5-6 years of free agency where no doubt all-star superstar players hit free agency and they don't sign until like a week in a training camp or a week in a spring training. Like I don't understand. I don't understand that at all. It boggles my mind. And that's why they're going to lock out next year. And it's going to be a long time.
Yeah. And ironically, Russ, the Yankees, when they had their 13-game winning streak, they didn't have Urshela. They didn't have Torres in the lineup. They had a couple guys in there who were light hitting, like Tyler Wade and Andrew Velasquez, who could actually run. They stole bases. They were bunting. They were hustling. They won their games when they had those guys in the lineup. And now they're going back to Earl Weaver 3-run home run crap, and they're losing. And they're a one-dimensional team. And if they don't hit it out of the park, they're going to lose.
Yeah. The last thing I want to say is. Michael Cohen said that I must be happy that Novak Djokovic lost. I wasn't happy. I don't like him, but I don't despise him either. I would have loved to have seen the record. He just didn't have it. Like, Medvedev was great. Like, that's just the way it is. But I felt bad with Djokovic seemingly crying in his towel. Like, I get it. He's probably not going to get that chance to do that ever again, and it hasn't happened since 1969 and Rod Laver. I get all that, but I didn't wish anything bad on him. I watched it like a lot of other people and wanted to see what would happen.
Still, going out in straights is
it's tough,
shocking.
Man.
And that's really tough. I mean,
but he started from behind the whole tournament. Every game he was down a set or down a set and a half, and then all of a sudden it would kick in. It just never kicked in this one.
Yeah. I honestly, it wasn't even on my radar. I was too busy watching the Bills lose.
Priorities.
Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, September 13th, 2021.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com, and we are pleased to be joined by Joe Yerdon, veteran reporter of the Buffalo and NHL scene, and we'll talk a number of items. This one just popped up about an hour ago, so I wanted to start off. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but Sylvain Lefebvre, former NHL defenseman, former assistant coach. I think he was assistant coach in Montreal. I know he coached the Hamilton Bulldogs, which was the Canadiens AHL affiliate.
I remember him as player, obviously.
Yeah, he was former Leaf, former Canadian, former Colorado Avalanche. He was to join Brad Larsen's coaching staff in Columbus, but according to the reports from a number of sources, he has been dismissed by the team because he decided not to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. And Joe, based on the rather stringent rules that have been implemented by the NHL, if you don't have the vaccine, you can't do a lot of things in the league or with these teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I mean, to me, this makes it pretty clear that Jarmo Kekalainen had an edict for everybody, at least on the coaching staff. I don't know, but we'll see what happens with the players. I imagine if there's a player that's holding out, they might soon get traded to somebody that doesn't really care. But this is a pretty high up edict to tell your coaches, listen, you get vaccinated or you're not going to be working here. And I don't know we're almost certainly going to hear more about this as time goes on. I imagine Lefebvre's not going to go quietly about this.
No.
I imagine there might be some sort of threat of legal action taken, but good luck getting anybody to hear that because it's very clear. The employer set the regulation. If you don't do this, you're not working here. And it's a safety thing. I mean, it's crazy. We have to still discuss these things. It's a safety thing. It's a health thing. And listen, if anybody on the team gets sick, then you're costing yourself a lot of problems. You're costing yourself money as far as the players are concerned. Like it's really bad news. And the fact that, an assistant coach is just like, no, I'm not doing that. Okay, man, like congrats. Like you're not working here anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I can only put myself in the situation as a reporter. I knew going back 5 or 6 months, if I didn't get vaccinated, I was not going to be going to games. I was not going to be going to training camp. I was not going to be going to practices. I didn't particularly want to get the vaccine, but I knew that I had to, not only for my own personal health, because I have pre-existing conditions, but because I needed to do my job. And I think has to be the approach even from players and coaches who are hesitant about it. It's something that you have to do. And I understand, with a lot of people, Russ, they treat their body as a temple or they don't believe in vaccines. I get it. But this is a situation where if you don't get it, you're not going to be able to do much.
I mean, maybe he has a reason, but we haven't heard the reason. So if we don't hear the reason, we have to sort of act accordingly. My take is he's made $15 million. So he probably figured, I'm not going to compromise my beliefs, whatever those are. And so I don't need the money. I don't need to do this. And, that's the part where I think it stinks for the Jackets because as a coach, you have to know you're around all these players all the time. And you have to know that if you're unvaccinated, the chance of you passing the virus to somebody is greater. Mm-hmm. And the coaches, I don't think, are under the same constraints as the players as far as being tracked, what they do after a game and everything, right, Joe? We never really hear about what they're doing. We hear about the players that, hey, they got to be in the hotel. You never hear about the coaches, honestly.
I assume it's the same way
I assume too, but what if it isn't? Because it's not, I don't know that it is because it's really run by the team, not the league, right? So
yeah. I mean, that's true. I think the working assumption is that anybody that's a close contact of the team has to fall under the same header, whether it's PR, team media, the trainers, equipment guy, the whole group. I think they've all got to fit under that same umbrella of being vaccinated or you're not working. Like that to me is seems pretty logical, given that if you're gonna keep the players under wraps like that, it's got to be everybody. And I think the rules have to be the same on the road. Like
you would
imagine,
hope, but again, like I said, the league can't mandate what coaches do. That's up to the team.
Mm-hmm.
And I just haven't heard any clear message on that.
Well, I look at it this way: owners, like if they have to buy or have to get separate hotel rooms for coaches or staffers that aren't vaccinated, if you're the employer, aren't you going to make them be like, listen, we're not spending X number of dollars extra, so you guys can each have your I mean, assuming they don't already have their own rooms on the road. I mean, I don't know, but if that's not the case, like if you got the equipment guys rooming together or whatever, whatever works. If you have to spend extra money to do something for them to cater to them, owners don't want to do that. I mean, some might care less than others, but I imagine spending that, over 41 games to get those extra rooms, probably not looking like something you want to fit in the budget.
Yeah, I just, unfortunately, I think some people, could be players, could be coaches, kind of look at it like the bubble, like, yeah, I don't want to do it. I just don't like the idea. I don't feel like doing it.
Well, I mean, like somebody else.
It seems like, Joe.
Well, I mean, if they hated the bubble, then why do you want to drag that around with you everywhere you go in the season? Like,
I know
if you don't get vaccinated, then you're living the bubble life everywhere you go.
All right, so I'll go a step further with that. They do create their own bubble by doing that, but they just don't feel that that's right. They feel like, well, I should have the right to not get vaccinated, and you shouldn't put me in a bubble. And because they will put them in a bubble, they don't want to be in a bubble. You
have the right to not get vaccinated, and we have the right, speaking as the team, to not employ you because you didn't get vaccinated. Right. Now, is there a lawsuit there? Maybe. Who knows?
I really don't think there is.
Right. I mean, the things are being implemented at the governmental level that I didn't think, and they may not be constitutional, but we're talking about like we're in a collective bargaining situation, and the NHL and the NHLPA seem to be in lockstep when it comes to vaccines and COVID. So I think they're in agreement there, but like somebody said in the chat, Rocky Thompson, the San Jose assistant coach, who's a well-regarded coach. I mean, he's been mentioned as a possible head coach a couple times. I don't think this is going to hurt him down the line. Maybe it's like next year, everything will be.
All right, I'm going to go a step further, Mike. I think it could hurt him down the line because I think if you think that there aren't going to be any more variants in the world, then you're living in a dream world.
No,
and because you already could read about them coming. So if you're a coach like Thompson and says, all right, I'm going to be unvaccinated, you might not get a job for the next 2 or 3 years. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be fans in the stands, and it doesn't mean there won't be playing. I think they will. But it still doesn't mean that they won't be offering other people booster shots. Like Cam just got his third shot, a booster shot, because of his health condition, whatever that might be. And a lot of us will have a chance at it later this month. That's what we're going to do to combat it in the future. But if you're unvaccinated, it's going to hurt your job status. Just look at football. I mean, Cam Newton has lost his career over this. Nobody's touching him. Washington should be calling him today, but they're not going to call him because he's unvaccinated. You're not going to bring in a guy who's unvaccinated now to quarterback your team and potentially get your team sick. That's where we're at.
Not to mention Ron Rivera's made it a very clear point from the get-go of Washington camp that, hey, guys, I kicked cancer. I can't get this thing.
Right.
Get vaccinated so at least your coach can stay alive. And some guys were just kind of like, I don't know. Maybe don't. There was reportedly one player who said maybe don't get cancer. And it's like, dude, like I would cut that guy 5 seconds after he said that and be like, all right, get out of here. Like that's enough.
I like Cam, but I like my life more. Okay, I know that a number of teams have had their rookie camps, like rookie development camps. The Leafs had theirs this weekend, their annual blue and white scrimmage. The tournaments like Traverse City are going next weekend. Joe, you and I are probably going to be at the one here between the Sabres, Bruins, and Devils. Mm-hmm. So we're getting close to the start of camp. And we talked about this a little bit last week, but as the calendar moves forward, the fact that, and we'll start with the Sabres and we'll move to other players. Rasmus Dahlin is not signed. Brady Tkachuk is not signed. Pettersson and Hughes are not signed. Robert Thomas. There's still some significant players. Most of them will get done by the first day of camp. This is just sort of the staring contest. But there are some players out there that, this could last a little longer. And starting with Dahlin, I think that with Dahlin, like with Tkachuk, it's probably not money. It's probably term.
Yeah, I agree with that, because I think, and I don't know if I discussed this with you guys before, or if it was on a different podcast. I've done enough of them that I'm getting confused where I'm saying what I'm saying. But
I'm right. Thanks.
But it's I think initially, before loads of guys started signing long-term deals, I think initially it was going to be a bridge deal situation for Dahlin, and then you started seeing guys signing massive contracts coming out of their ELCs, and you're just like, oh, maybe the light bulb probably went off for Kevin Adams. Said, maybe we should get it done now, so we're not paying more down the road. And I think at that point, where initially perhaps Dahlin's people are saying like, hey, let's go long term here, let's see if we can get it, as opposed to 2 years, show me. Maybe they did want that. I don't know, but I think the conversation changes where the Sabres do want that long term, and they want to get that cap number as low as possible. But I think if you're Dahlin, you're like, I could cash in now. I could cash in one more time if I go 6. And
I just think Dahlin
5 or 6. But yeah,
I think you're right. But I think Dahlin's also looking at this like, if you're going to keep me here long term, you're going to pay me market value. I'm not taking anything less. There's no discount here. And if they don't give it to him, then he'll get the best deal he can. And then he knows that's it with him in Buffalo at that point. He probably won't get re-signed. And that's what happens with a lot of these players, Joe. We talked about it on Off the Post the other day. The art of the bridge deal, I kind of looked at a bunch of them, and most of them lead to the guy leaving. And even though it keeps him there temporarily, it's kind of like the franchise tag in football. It doesn't keep him there most of the time. Once in a blue moon, yes, the guy does re-sign with a team. Like I brought up Matt Dumba, he did re-sign with his team. But you've got the Lion A's, you got all these other guys that you could look at, a host of them, that usually that year that the deal's running out, they end up trading them.
Yeah.
Well, how many times are those discussions, a little bit feistier than other ones where it's...
I think they are. Actually, I used the word disgruntled. I said, this is a way to get a disgruntled employee under contract. And Anthony kind of took exception with the word disgruntled, but I think that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they take it personally. Like a Trouba situation was personal.
I think it's getting personal with Brady Tkachuk at this point. He's seeing everybody else get signed, and he's not.
Okay. I think Tkachuk is along the same lines as Dahlin. I think he wants shorter term. I don't know if he wants 3 years like his brother, but I think he wants a shorter term because right now you don't know. And I think Dahlin probably has this philosophy in Buffalo, Russ. It's like, okay, I don't want to lock myself in on 8 years where an organization has done nothing but lose. I mean, Ottawa, if he locks himself for 8 years like Shabbat, and then Eugene doesn't spend money, then he's stuck. Now, you can always say, well, trade me, but then he loses all control here. I think the shorter the term, the more control that you have. And other than like Tampa guys like Kucherov and Point, you're right. If it's 3 years, then usually that's walking themselves to free agency. And if it's 5 years or longer, then most of the time those players stay. But I know that Eck reported something about, the Blues being interested in Brady Tkachuk. I mean, yes, but you know what? Brady Tkachuk is going nowhere. He's this centerpiece of that Senators team. They're going to sign him. It's just a question of how long.
But I do want to say this because Funky says, he never thought Tkachuk would stay there long term. I could tell you this much from covering prospects all these years and the NHL too. When players get drafted by a team, there is a built-in loyalty there. Now, for a guy like Kaprizov, none. He doesn't want to be in Minnesota. We all know that. Minnesota knows that. So they just can do the best what they can with that situation. Most of the time, though, the player is willing to listen to the team he's been drafted by and playing for. And if they get more than they expected from that team or better term than they expected from that team, a lot of times that loyalty will kick in. But a lot of times those teams, because they most of the time end up being teams that are sort of in the middle or the bottom, don't offer that to the player. And then the player's like, well, I enjoyed playing here, but now I'm going to go elsewhere because I want to get paid. And that is the tough part. That's why I always say to teams, and Ottawa's going to be the next one, it's great to have all these top picks, but if you don't get to keep 3 or 4 or 5 of them, you're just going to keep rotating that carousel.
The part with Brady Tkachuk that I'm now curious about is after Drake Batherson signed that pretty juicy deal, how much that changes the conversation with Tkachuk, because it kind of sets a bar for Ottawa and for Tkachuk to say, like, well, okay, if you're giving this guy this much, well, here's how much I think I'm worth, and I don't know, maybe you guys should aim for that. We know Melnyk is a very particular kind of owner, and
that's a nice thing to say. Yeah.
Yes.
Very democratic of you.
Yeah. And, Pierre Dorion, he does his best with what he can. And
right. The whole world knows that.
Yes. I think everybody's kind of sympathetic to Dorion in that respect. But if I'm Tkachuk, I'm just saying, like, man, you guys hurried up and got Batherson done, right? Where I don't know that anybody had any thought that, like, oh geez, they better get Drake Batherson done right away. And so, not against him, he's a pretty damn good player. But
but that was more of a target of opportunity. I think they they signed it for 6 years at under $5 million. That was sort of like a Dvorak or a Keller deal in Arizona, where they were buying term and they were buying low. Mm-hmm. They did the same thing with Shabbat, because they got 8 years out of Shabbat and they got him at $8 million. And I think he's one of the better defensemen in the league, but maybe if he continues to grow to where they think he's going to be, that's going to be a bargain. Mm-hmm. With Tkachuk, if it's 8 years, I'm not taking any less than like what Mikko Rantanen's making, 9.5. And that might be the problem. It's like
it's the cost of a franchise player. He wants to be the franchise
player. He is. So
that's why Darlene's looking the same thing. Like, listen, I am your franchise player. Pay me like your franchise player. Jack Eichel's not going to be the franchise anymore. We know that.
Well, thank you for that subtle transition there, Russ, because I was going to ask you about that, Joe, because Elliot Friedman reported last week that basically the shift from Peter Fish to Pat Brisson has meant essentially nothing, because there has been some re-engagement of chatter in terms of talk with other teams. But I still get the feeling that the big roadblock here is the surgery. And the longer we go, I mean, if you wait till the beginning of training camp, you're talking about recovery time after Christmas for Eichel. And that's being optimistic. That's 3 months, that you might be talking early January. And, I think Eichel wants to play in Beijing for Team USA, but, he's not going to be able to get the surgery until he gets traded or until the Sabres agree to the deal that he wants. Where do you think this is standing right now, or are we just standing still? Is it just not moving?
I think it's something where there was a lot of discussions going on a few weeks ago, both between Jack and the Sabres and interested teams. And I think they were just kind of like, all right, listen, let's take a couple weeks here. Let's cool off. We'll reconvene. We'll see if the discussion changes at all. It doesn't. And teams are getting ready to wind up for camp. You got guys in town doing it, the NHL level players doing informal practices and whatnot. And you got your prospect camps and all that stuff. Everything's building up to get to training camp. And I think at that point, teams are a lot more serious about getting their ducks in a row for the season. And they're saying, like, all right, if we're going to do this, how are we going to arrange it? And I think at this point, if you're a team that's acquiring Jack, I mean, you kind of hold the cards now because you can just say, like, well, look, he's hurt. Why are we going to give you everything? And then, should you get to the start of training camp and he has the physical and they say, yeah, no, he can't play because his neck's bad. Then you're saying, well, yeah. And then the teams, other teams get to say, well, yeah, even your doctor said he can't go. So, why are we going to give you four pieces for a guy that can't play? Whereas the recovery time part to it, I think that's a lot bigger. That's a much bigger deal for Jack than it is the acquiring team.
Right. Because
the acquiring team, if they're giving up prospects and futures, they wouldn't see those futures for 1, 2, 3 years, maybe at most. Whereas they can wait, if they acquire Eichel, they can say, like, oh, listen, man, we can wait a few more months for you to come in. We got you for 5 years. So if you're the acquiring team, you can kind of hold you can hold the line all you want to. Whereas if you're Jack, you're kind of screwed, because if you want to play the Olympics, and I know damn well he does, and he would be on the team, like there's no doubt about that.
Yeah, they'll save a spot for him if they feel like he's getting the surgery. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And if this drags on until then, I mean, listen, I've said this from the start. It will get uglier the longer this goes on. If we get into the start of the season and there's been no movement, it's going to get really, really, really ugly.
What is ugly? Is he going to tweet a frowny face this time? Like, what's it going to be?
Well, no, ugly in this case, I think, means taking a formal grievance to the NHL through the NHLPA about the difference of opinion, and then you have to have an arbitrator see through it and get something figured out, which I can't imagine the Sabres would be too eager to do. I mean, maybe they would. Maybe they would be like, no.
Well, at that point, they don't really have a choice. Like at that point, it's like you going against your employer. The employer has to answer to it. Like there's no
right. But what I'm saying though is, like, do they want to go through that entire process where they know the guy getting the operation done certainly should have some rights here?
It depends. Like they'll talk to their lawyer. If they feel it's ironclad, they'll be like, yeah, we'll do it.
Yeah, but that's also where Pat Brisson comes into it, where he's war tested for these kinds of battles, and I think that's. Listen, Jack still loves Peter Fish. He still loves that group there in Boston, but Pat Brisson is your general coming in to take care of the campaign as far as that goes, and I think if it gets to that point, it's even worse for what the Sabres want to get in trade, because you're just like, wow, this guy really is unhappy with you guys. Why should we take anything?
Yeah.
You know what? Like Robert E. Lee was a general. Sometimes generals lose.
The legal term that I heard was called coercive malpractice, because basically what that's saying is the Sabres are making him have a surgery that may be detrimental to his health, which is not really the case. But what the case is, he believes that the disc replacement surgery is best for him and best for him being able to get back to 100%. The fusion surgery is acceptable and is not in any way going to affect him in terms of. It'll affect him in terms of range of mobility, but it will get him back and get him healthy and hopefully correct the problem. But that's the thing here, and I haven't heard any opinion to the contrary.
Well, I'll tell you the problem.
This is collectively bargained.
Yeah, the problem that I see for the Eichel side of it is there is no real case study that shows what he's doing will work in hockey. You got one guy in MMA to look at, and a judge is going to look at that and say, yeah, but what about in the field you're in? This is not the field you're in. What do you have? What kind of proof do you have? What kind of data do you have? How many, and they're going to have to come up with doctors saying, yeah, I believe this is going to go, but they don't have anything ironclad. And I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm just saying it's going to be hard to push through on that and win.
And I think when it comes to that argument, you could say, well, geez, if MMA guys are getting this done and they're having successful careers after that, you could say MMA is a lot harder on the body, a lot harder than all of that on an.
You could say that, but
you can argue it, but there's no proof.
Right, but it's a different sport which requires different things that you do.
And the guys in MMA don't have 5 years left at $50 million and have insured and all the so.
And I one more quick thing to the CBA point about how it's collectively bargained, and that is a huge sticking point. I think it was agreed upon, but I think that was a situation where you're not thinking about something where this kind of situation happens where both sides really disagree on it, because usually it's pretty amiable, it's amicable. Everybody's just kind of like, yeah, whatever's best, that's good. This kind of thing has two wildly differing opinions. And I mean, if you listen to the way Jack's potential surgeon laid it out when he spoke with Friedman and Merrick, and he says, like, listen, you can get the artificial disc replacement. If it doesn't take, you get the fusion anyways. Whereas if you do the fusion, you can't do the disc replacement. Now, I'm not a doctor. I don't know if that's true, but if that's the case,
it sounds logical. But I don't know either.
But if I'm the Sabres, I'm just kind of like, well, if that's the case, well, yeah, fine, do it that way. Like, I mean, if we ultimately get what we want out of this, okay, fine. I mean, the problem there is that you're dragging it out over a longer term, possibly. I mean, you're looking at if it doesn't take, you're going to lose another 3 months at some point. But I mean, better to have your full health and try everything you can to try to make your life better for it.
Like, I'm going to answer to the chat room, to Goalie FP, and say to Frank that, yeah, there's no data if nobody actually does it. But the issue is Eichel does have the right to say, hey, I will terminate this contract. I'm going to go do this. Right. I'm going to go play in the Olympics, and then I'll be a free agent. And he has the right to do that. He could do that. And the Sabres might say, that's fine, Jack. Go ahead.
And that's a $50 million risk. That's really but
that's also Buffalo losing him and getting absolutely nothing in return too.
Well, I don't think there's any other way at that point, Joe. Like, I think, you know what I mean? Like, that's they can't have everything.
Right.
You know, he could do that. He could use the Olympics as a sort of a preview. Hey guys, I'm 100% healthy. Here you go. And do you think that teams won't be lining up to sign him to a big contract?
Would.
Of course they would.
He won't get $10 million a year, but he'll get back, instead of a $50 million term, he'll get like 35, 40.
And Russ, he could sign a 1-year deal like Taylor Hall,
too, yeah.
And then get another contract. I don't know.
He might actually produce, unlike Taylor Hall.
Some news and notes. Russ, you mentioned this player's name a few times. Ryan Donato, who has gone from Boston to Minnesota to San Jose. Now he is a member of the Seattle Kraken. He signs a 1-year league minimum $750,000 one-way contract. He actually produced in San Jose. He actually put up some decent offensive numbers. It's really strange how this young player is now on his 4th team in, I think, 5 years, Russ. It's really
weird. I mean, I think the league is worried. Certain teams are worried about, hey, he doesn't play great defense. Okay, so if a guy doesn't play great defense, they want like 50 points out of you. Maybe he's not a 50-point guy, but he's a guy who could score 20 goals for you. If you want to put him on your power play, he could score 20 goals for you. I mean, I think there's some teams that could use that. I think this is good for Seattle because, again, Seattle's going to have to – they're not going to have a set lineup for a while. So it gives him a chance to show them, hey, I've got this shot. I can score some points. I can get assists. And, yeah, he had 20 points last year, which on a regular NHL season is like 35 to 40. I mean, it's not like the Kraken don't have players like that, and it's not like other teams don't. I just think the Sharks kind of look at it, and because the Sharks want everybody to be a two-way guy, you know, he falls through the cracks again. Same with Minnesota. They don't really put up with the, hey, you don't play great defense thing. And it's not like Donato doesn't want to play great defense. He uses his stick and stuff. It's just the way it is, the kind of player he is. But at the end of the day, this kid has a good shot, a really good shot. And you might as well give another chance on another team because, you know, he could be, you know, another player that just gets passed around for a while and then finally catches on. It happens.
Joe, the guy I was thinking of that sort of got passed around and went to, you know, 4 or 5 teams and then finally settled in is Anthony Duclair. I mean, and defensively, he's never been the greatest player, but, you know, Rangers, Arizona, Chicago, Columbus, Ottawa, now Florida, and he's found a home in Florida. Could Donato be that type of player that finally finds some place that's a good fit and then he stays there for a few years?
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly been those flashes of really good skill from Donato. And I remember watching him at Harvard and he was just a dynamite scorer for Harvard. But, but in the NHL, it's so strange how it works out because when he blasted on the scene, you're just like, oh, okay, this kid's going to be something special. But the ebbs and flows of things, sometimes it's not always the right way. I see Donato as a more refined, more well-rounded player more well-rounded version of a guy like Brandon Peary. Whereas Peary's a pure offensive player, not going to really give you a lick of defensive responsibility, but man, if you need offense, he's your guy. Whereas Donato, not as quite as skilled offensively, better defensively, but in that same range where he's going to be able to be. I think Seattle's a great situation for him because, like Russ said, they don't have anything set in stone there. So if he can carve his way into a spot and find a happy home there, I think he could be there for a while because he's got the skill. He's got the ability. I think he just needs.
He's very coachable. Obviously, with his dad as a coach, it's not like he's a headstrong kid or anything.
Right.
I honestly think I think this will work out for him.
This could be a perfect fit for him because he's going to get playing time. He's going to get out.
He just doesn't have the speed of a Duclair. Like, that was the even more puzzling thing, was the speed that Duclair has. It's like,
yeah.
I always like looking back at like this day in hockey history, and 3 years ago today was a rather monumental trade. And I'm coming to the conclusion that even if the Ottawa Senators had got next to nothing back, they would have won this deal. But here's the deal, and I'll just read it off to you. The Erik Karlsson deal. Erik Karlsson and Francis Perron to San Jose for Dylan DeMello, Chris Tierney, Rudy Balsers, the signing rights to Josh Norris, and a first-round pick, which turned out to be Tim Stützle, and a second-round pick in 2019 and another second-round pick in 2021. Russ, that could be the worst trade in hockey history.
Okay. I mean, sure. No question about it. But again, did you know the player was going to take this kind of nosedive? Like, this is...
No, of course not.
You didn't know that. I mean...
And everybody said San Jose robbed them blind at that point.
Yeah, maybe there were some that said that because of what Karlsson did in the past. And I just think it's one of those things where I think there was a little bit of guesswork after his Achilles surgery as to where he would be as a player. And I think he struggled for a little while. I think he's playing better now than like last year. I thought he was better than the year before. So I don't know if that's an indication where he's kind of figured it out. This is what I am now. I'm no longer like an 85-point defenseman, but I could be a 55-point defenseman or something like that. Maybe. But yeah, it doesn't look good. There's no way around that.
Yeah, that deal is I remember at the time saying, like, geez, what is Ottawa doing here? Like, they're just getting the wool pulled over their eyes once again. And San Jose at that point was still an outside cup threat type of team. Like, they were barely hanging on to like that being that threat. But adding a guy like Karlsson, you're just like, well, geez, okay, well, here they go. Like, this is going to put them over the top. And then the floor fell out for the Sharks completely over the last couple of years. And then you're just like, wow, they just paid this guy a boatload of money, and now they stink. And now they seem to be just kind of floating out there with all kinds of issues. And whereas Ottawa's kind of got their act together. Listen, these are the breaks sometimes, but it reminds me quite a bit. This is throwing it back a bit. This reminds me quite a bit of the Peter Forsberg deal. There were so many futures involved, and then you're just kind of like, wow, I don't know how this works out for Colorado. This is a great deal for Philly, and then oops, Colorado has Quebec, Colorado gets the best player out of the deal, and you're like, well, there you go.
Yeah, I have to say San Jose. If I'm a San Jose Sharks fan, I'll call me in a decade, because I don't know how Brent Burns is a really good defenseman, but he's starting to be on the downslope. Karlsson, I'm not sure he'll ever get back to where he was before all the injury problems. Vlasic is going downhill. They're up against the cap. Their goaltending right now is Aiden Hill as their starter, who wasn't even good enough to be the third. Well, he wasn't even good enough to be the backup in Arizona. He was always the third string, and now all of a sudden he's going to be a starter. They're just overburdened with contracts, Joe. And then I'm not even getting into the Evander Kane situation, which we haven't heard a peep out of that in a couple weeks, which, silence is deafening. When there's nothing coming out, I start to worry about it. But the Sabres, the Red Wings, the Coyotes, I think, are in better shape than the San Jose Sharks right now.
Oh, I don't know. Don't go that far. Don't go that far.
What hurts the Sharks is that they've had so many years of having to draft late in the first round, and then also giving up first round picks as well. I mean, obviously the pick they gave up to Ottawa in the deal. Would have been nice to see Tim Stützle in a Sharks uniform, or whoever they would have taken there, but
yeah, you don't know they would take him though.
Right. I mean, giving up a top 5 pick probably wasn't their idea that it was going to be a top 5 pick. They're probably thinking like, well, if we give up a 20, number 28, 25 pick, whatever, we made it deep in the playoffs. That's cool.
Right.
But it's thinking you're in a better place than you were, and then you ended up at the bottom anyways. And now you're like, oh crap. now we got to get things figured out on the fly. Whereas the Sharks were always a rebuild on the fly team.
Right.
You lose one guy, you bring in another couple. Doug Wilson was a master trader. Like, he was always able to get the better of most deals. I think the shine's come off of Wilson here in the last year or two, but he's still a pretty dynamite GM. I think the Sharks could have been a lot worse the last couple of years without him.
Yeah, I just think there's things that are happening there that don't get looked at. Like, I think John Leonard's going to be a really good player. I don't think he's a superstar, but he already had 13 points in his rookie year, and I've seen him score, so I know he can get some goals. Shintsov was a undrafted guy who went right into their lineup after like 20 games in the A and has played pretty good hockey. Right. And again, he was a guy that played internationally and nobody drafted him, and so they signed him and did that. Sasha Chmelevski is going to score at the NHL level. He had like 2 points in 5 games, but this kid can skate and he's smart. And so I think people are forgetting about some of these kinds of players that are going to help them not hit rock bottom. Mm-hmm. They're not going to be like the Coyotes in that regard, because there'll be a time where they could spend money again. It's just, they're not there right now, but I think there'll be a time.
It reminds me a bit of when they got Mario Ferraro involved, where I was kind of like, I don't know. I mean, hey, maybe this guy turns into something. It turns out he's pretty solid.
Ferraro had a great year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of talk about Thomas Hertl being potentially traded. He's got a year left in his contract, and some of the talk that came out last week, it sort of was indicative of, I think you guys better trade me, it was hinting that his future in San Jose was probably not long. So
look what they got for Barclay Goodrow. I mean, that still was a hell of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a good deal for both teams, and look at how much it helped Tampa and their.
William Eklund will be in the NHL next year,
probably. Yeah, so it's not a black hole, but I see a lot of, you're spending $26.5 million on 3 defensemen all over the age of 32.
Yeah, another kid too, Daniil Gushkin, who I was very high on, had to play in the USHL last year just because of circumstances. Yeah, he only had 32 goals in 46 games. Now, he is 19, so if you want to say that, that's fine, but he had 64 points. It's not like, Sean Farrell went back there too and lit it up. If you go back there and light it up, there's no shame there. So they do have prospects.
James Reimer and Aiden Hill. There's your goaltending tandem.
I don't know. The defensemen are paid a lot there, but I think in the situation, you'd rather have high-paid defensemen kind of backing things up, because they can help both your goaltending and your forwards out, especially guys with Burns' and Karlsson's ability.
That's true.
Vlasic's a little bit on the backside of the hill now, but he still plays a solid defensive game. Not as good as he used to, but
right.
I mean, if you're going to have holes in the lineup, make sure it's not on the defense when you're a young team.
Right.
That's all.
Right. Russ, you wanted to mention a couple names at the Sabres camp. The Sabres are playing the Bruins and the Devils this weekend in Buffalo, and there was a couple names that intrigued you.
Yeah, first one that I had seen played live more than a few times is Brandon Bureau, who came from Penn State. Now, he did play in Rochester last year, but a lot of people probably didn't see him, and he only played 15 games, I think. He's a really good skater, and he could score some points. I'm not saying he's going to be a big point guy at the NHL level, but I'm saying at a bottom 6 role on a team that probably is going to need some bottom 6 help, at 25, that's a good guy to have in there now, because he may be able to show you a little more than you thought he had, because a lot of times when these guys come out of college, there is a little bit of a learning curve at the AHL level. I look at Tanner Lazinski for the Flyers now. He had off-season surgery. If he didn't, I think he would have been the 4C this year for sure for Philly. Now they may have to wait a little while. Morgan Barron is doing great for the Rangers. I think he's opening some eyes there. He would have, I think, honestly, I mean, I may be a little biased because I cover the ECAC, but Cornell had a chance to win it all with that team and him on that team. And that whole season when the plug got pulled was brutal for them, because when's Cornell really going to have a chance to possibly win a championship or at least get to the final? Right. And I think they were poised for that. They were, terrific. And he had a great year, and he's starting to shine in rookie camp. So I think Bureau is an under the radar guy that if he could show some points, I know he could skate. He could do a lot of little things. That's a good one. And then the more intriguing one is Nick Boca, because He is the forgotten guy from the NTDP. And actually, Mike and Joe, you saw him play in the 2014 All-American Prospects game in Buffalo. He was there. So it's a funny thing because I can see Nick Boca because, look, he's a good puck mover. He actually could play defense. Like, he's a good defensive defenseman. But I could see him – I would have him on the team just so he could harass his former teammates. Let him go harass Matthew Tkachuk. Let him go harass Austin Matthews. Like, he is the kind of guy that on a team that's not going to be great, that you could get him to stir it up on the blue line with some of those guys. That would be good for the Sabres, and I think the fans would like it, Joe.
Yeah, he's. I did remember that name. I had that Obi-Wan Kenobi sort of. That's a name I've not heard since a long, long time. But when you had me go look back at his numbers, I was like, yeah, it's all coming together now because you see the triple-digit PIMs, and you're just like, all right, okay, yeah, this is the guy. But he's playing for a contract here. I mean, if he can show. There's always guys in this.
He's going to flatten somebody in that camp. Mark my words. He will flatten somebody.
100%. And it's easy to make a name for yourself in this particular prospects challenge. We've seen, we saw Frank Vetrano years ago blow up and scored like a ton of goals in that, and was just like, whoa, who's this guy? And then suddenly he's in Boston's lineup. You're like, oh, all right. Jake DeBrusk had a monster challenge one year. Some of the Devils guys too. I'm blanking. I think Mackenzie Blackwood had a really good year early on, and
this is when rookie camp takes on a different meaning. Like the prospect camp, I love just to see where somebody's at. They're measuring some of their fitness and those kinds of things, and I'm into that. I'm kind of nerdy, but this is the one like you could actually get a contract, whether it's an AHL contract or two-way deal. This is where you could actually get on a team.
Russ, I remember at the blue and white scrimmage a couple years ago, this unknown guy out of the University of Denver who wowed it with the Leafs. And that was Trevor Moore, and they signed him. To an ELC, and now I think he just signed a new deal with the LA Kings. He's an NHL player. I don't know if he's a third, fourth liner, but you can find diamonds in the rough, and he had a pretty good career. So two quick things here, Joe. The Sabres put out their numbers of their new additions, and Aaron Dell was given Ryan Miller's number 30.
You mean Joe Daly's number 30?
And Joe Daly.
Joe Daly.
Yes, and Joe Daly's number 30 as well as. But I mean, come on, did they have any sense of history?
This has happened twice since Miller's left, where they've technically assigned the number. Michael Hauser had it in training camp one year, and I think it was one of those like, well, he's never going to get to the NHL, so whatever. Just he can wear 30 in camp, it's fine. And then, last year happens and they're like, you can't wear 30 up here. Sorry, you're going to have to wear something else. But Michael Neuvirth wanted to wear 30 as well when the Sabres acquired him. And the Sabres, I mean, that was fresh, very fresh after Miller leaving. And they're like, dude, you're not getting 30. Like, that's just not happening. And this is the only team, Buffalo is the only team he's never worn 30 to play for. So that's saying something. But Sabres are just they're masters of just turning like what should be a fun, exciting day for fans to see the new numbers of the new guys, and then turning it into a complete fiasco. Yeah, because we'll see how hard-headed they are about this. Like if
I want to give you some names, Joe, because you're a good baseball guy, and you too, Mike. So Jerry Kuzman recently had his number retired, but when he stopped playing for the Mets, the next year Wayne Twitchell got his number, and then Ed Lynch had it for a little while, and Kevin Baez and Tito Navarro, and they kept giving out his number. Sean Gilmartin had it for 3 years until 2017, and now it's retired. Mm-hmm. There are teams that just do it, and it's inexplicable.
I listen. The Sabres are very weird with their retired numbers as it is, anyways. Yeah, and there's a few that are hanging up there where I'm just kind of like, I don't know if you needed to retire that, but they wanted to retire the entire French Connection, so they retired. You could make a case that the late great Rennie Robert maybe, but I think it was right to retire all of them. Yep. And I think Danny Gare is retired, Cossack, LaFontaine, and Tim Horton. Yes.
Yeah, Tim Horton,
I get it. It's a sad story, but like his Sabres career wasn't that long.
No, 2 years, I think. So
I mean, it's fine. Like, whatever. But like Miller and Hasek are the reason why you never had to worry about goaltending for 20 years in Buffalo.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know that anybody wore 39 after Hasek left.
No.
I don't think. And nobody had worn 30 since Miller left, and that was 7 years ago at this point.
All you had to do was ask for it, Joe. That's what Darren Bell found out.
And he just retired. Like he literally just retired. He's 5 years away from making it to the Hall of Fame. Maybe.
Why do I have the feeling that Aaron Dell is going to beg off and they'll
No, he's not. That's his number, Mike. He's taking that number.
He's going to get vilified if he wears that number, because the first time he gives up a goal, to be like, "You're no Miller, you stink." He
was going to get vilified anyhow because he can't play anymore. That's beside the point.
He might not even make it to Buffalo. Like, there's that part of it too. But
yeah,
the other question is, as part
of here's the thing: he wore 32 his whole career. Like, is Rob Ray going to beat him up or John Scott going to come back and beat him up if he wears 32? I don't know.
Maybe that's the issue.
Norm Lacombe. No, the other question briefly here, as part of their roster.
Well, actually, Mike, sorry, one thought. Could Dell have asked the Sabres, because I was a big Ryan Miller fan, and could he have cleared it with Miller, and we just don't know about it?
Hey, if that's the case, cool. Like, that's an awesome
Sometimes
story
that happens.
That's the old Ace Bailey, Ron Ellis story, right? Ace Bailey wanted Ron Ellis to wear number 6, so Ron Ellis wore number 6.
And I'll say this: Ryan Miller's the kind of guy that would be just like, "Yeah, man, go ahead, have fun." Like, I think of the fans are pissed about this. Like, I get it, I understand. Ryan Miller's probably like, "Yeah, okay, like,
yeah, I don't think
it's been years, like, okay."
And
if you're gonna retire the number, don't hand it out. Like, just don't do that.
And if it is that, I think fans will then say, okay, it's with his okay, then I think that'll pass. But if it's not, then I think it's going to be another story. But the other thing I wanted to bring up, it tied up to the goaltending. Luukkonen is one of the 3 goalies playing in the games this weekend. What do you think their plan is? Is it play the full season in Rochester? Is it half a season? I mean, because Anderson and Dell, they're really place setters. I mean, they're really holding the spots until Luukkonen is ready. Is it just a question of when he shows that he's ready, then they call him up?
Yeah, Anderson's a bulldog competitor, but he understands his role. You know, he is his uniform number. He is 41, so he's in a position where he's kind of show you the ropes guy at this point as well, like a true veteran.
Yeah, he's
guy, and he's excellent for that. And I think for Luukkonen, I think ideally they want to get him as many games as possible during camp. Which, I mean, I would not be surprised if he starts every single game during this prospect challenge. Both games, it's 2 games, every single game. Yeah, right. Because the other 2 guys are just invites. Like, okay, fine. Like, they're there to warm the bench. That's cool. But you want Luukkonen playing 60 minutes of both of those games. You want him playing a ton of the preseason games too, because I think you need to know where he's at.
Right.
I don't think the plan is for him to be in Rochester all season. He needs games, but I think he'll be able to get those games at the NHL level too, because if Aaron Dell beats you out in camp, either Aaron Dell's had like a Hulkamania run in training camp and just is running wild and everybody's stopping everything, or Luukkonen's playing very poorly. And I think if that's the case, then you need him in Roch. But
I hope for him that Dell plays better than we hoped. Maybe he doesn't beat him out, but they say, all right, you know what? Go down to the AHL because Dell's holding his own right now. Mm-hmm. I think that's still the best case scenario for him. I really don't want to see him in the NHL yet.
Yeah, I just have the feeling they're leaving the door very open for him to take the opportunity to be in the NHL. I mean, he got a couple of games last year and probably wasn't ready for that action yet. I can't imagine that he totally was, but
no, I mean, he gave up a lot of
and I mean his whole development arc has been stunted so many different times, different ways. Just, I feel bad for him because he is tremendously talented. He's a super kid. But at this point, like, I think the patience, it's not so much the patience. It's just kind of like, we got to know what we got here. Because you're looking at Eric Portillo probably starting in Michigan this year. Maybe they win a title. Maybe he comes out, and then suddenly you got a guy right on his heels, and you're thinking like, well, maybe this is our 1-2 for the future, and your future might be next year.
Okay, but go back and look at like Carter Hart. We're talking about a guy who only has 51 pro games.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's very similar to Carter Hart. He's 22. You know, it's how many times do we need to see this kind of thing where you might get early returns, but then the later returns are not going to be what you hope.
But that's where teams are just trying to maximize getting the most, trying to get the most out of the ELC guys.
I know.
You keep seeing that over and over again, and like that skews
the
development
should be
younger.
Than that. I get it.
100% agree. And like they slow played it with Ullmark, which I think ultimately was the right play. Like
it was the right play.
He played in Rochester for 2.5 years until he was like a dominant AHL goalie, and then they're like, "All right, man, you're up."
Yeah, once he got done complaining about the ice in Rochester, he was much better.
And Russ, I mean, it was 18 games in the AHL, and then Carter Hart for 1 year, and then Carter Hart was in the NHL. I mean, the only difference is Luukkonen. It's ECHL, AHL spread over 2 or 3 years, so there's a little more maturity in terms of.
But it's still not a lot of games.
It's not a lot of games, yes, and that's why I think the Sabres ideally probably want to start him in Rochester and get him a lot of work, and then maybe by Christmas he's up. I mean, the one thing you don't want to do, Joe, is expose him, and this is going to be a bad team. Expose him to getting pummeled. You know, like Marty Baron was pummeled in his first pro game, I think age 19, when they called him up to play against Pittsburgh. You don't want to do that. You want to give him at least a chance to have some confidence and to play well. And if they're going to be really bad, then I think all the time in Rochester will shelter him from getting abused.
I don't disagree with that. I do think the Sabres defense is going to be a little bit better than people are expecting. I think people look at that crew and they're like, this group stinks. It's a fair thing to say. Don't get me wrong. But I look at it this year could be a very much like a Marc-Andre Fleury first year with Pittsburgh for Luukkonen, where the team's bad. There's some promising parts there, but they're not close to competing, and he's going to have to deal with a lot of it. And I think that's where having a guy like Anderson really helps, because he's been all over the league. He's been a very good goaltender, and he's got the kind of mental makeup that I think every goalie needs to have a mind like he does, where it's just bad game, it's instantly out of his head, and he's just like, all right, like whatever. Like, I mean, he's a pretty unflappable dude, and he's confident. Like that's what I really respect Craig Anderson for, all of that stuff. So, you know, I think this. Ultimately, I think it can play out like a Fleury season where, hey, the numbers don't look great, but it's something to build on. I worry, though, that it doesn't necessarily skew correct. Down. Yeah, that's what
he got sent back down, Fleury.
Yeah, hey, listen, you
don't want to do that when you have Pekka Luukkonen come up and he has, I don't know, 4 games like last year, like he's like, okay, he's barely an NHL goalie, and then you have to send him back down again.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's what last year could have been for him too. Like they had so many issues, and Luukkonen went from hot. He was hot and cold in those games that he did start here. So but I mean, you know, I look back at that half season with Cincinnati and with Rochester. I mean, he was an all-star player for Cincinnati. Yeah, I think he was actually on the ECHL All-Star team that year, or the midseason All-Star game. And then there were struggles in Rochester. I mean, but like, you got to play those games. You got to get used to the step up in the speed and the skill. And he got a little whiff of that in the NHL last year. And you know what? He's a guy that every year he just improves. He finds ways to improve his game. And I think for the first time in a long time, he's had a full summer where he's healthy, he's good to go, and he's got a chance to get back into form. So I'm really anxious to see what he looks like.
All right. Great job, guys. We'll be back tomorrow for another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For our guest, Joe Yerdon, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.